Lisa Morgan thought she knew her son, Ethan, a quiet, polite 14-year-old. But the day she discovered his hidden journal filled with plans for mass violence, her world shattered, revealing a darkness no parent could imagine. It began like any other quiet morning in suburban Brooksville. The sun had barely risen, spilling golden light across the neat rows of houses and manicured lawns. Birds chirped lazily, and the faint hum of distant traffic marked the beginning of another ordinary day. Lisa Morgan, a devoted single mother, moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing breakfast for her family. Her 14-year-old son, Ethan, sat at the table, quietly eating cereal, his movements measured and deliberate, as though each action had been carefully considered. On the surface, he appeared calm, ordinary, a typical adolescent boy navigating the rhythm of morning routines. Yet beneath that composed exterior, a storm was quietly brewing, one that would shatter everything Lisa thought she knew about her child. Ethan's bedroom, a space she had long considered simply his private sanctuary, held secrets that would soon make Lisa's blood run cold. What appeared to be a typical teenager's room was in fact a meticulously organized nest of darkness. Hidden in drawers and beneath loose floorboards were notebooks, drawings, and small devices, each documenting acts of cruelty, violence, and death. Tiny traps and knives, carefully arranged and tested, demonstrated an unsettling curiosity that had long gone unnoticed. At first glance, it might have seemed like the imagination of a creative young mind, but the precision, repetition, and obsessive documentation suggested something far more sinister. Lisa had noticed peculiarities over the years, minor incidents that had seemed trivial at the time. Strange disappearances of neighborhood pets, odd noises at night, and small acts of destruction had been easy to dismiss as accidents or the work of other children. Ethan's fascination with local crime stories and news coverage had also appeared as normal teenage interest, the kind of morbid curiosity many adolescents develop. But there had always been something in the way he watched, in the intensity of his gaze, that unsettled her. She told herself it was nothing, that her imagination was playing tricks on her, that teenagers were often strange and unpredictable. Still, unease lingered at the edge of her mind. The first unmistakable sign that her child was harboring darkness came with the discovery of a neighbor's cat, found brutally mutilated in the alley behind their home. The cuts were precise, intentional, almost ritualistic, leaving no room for doubt that the act was deliberate. Lisa's heart sank as she connected this horror to the patterns she had glimpsed over the years. Each small incident, once easy to ignore, now formed a terrifying chain, one that traced back to her own son. The realization that her child, the boy she had raised and protected, could be capable of such calculated cruelty left her reeling. She felt trapped between disbelief and horror, unable to reconcile the loving child she knew with the methodical darkness he had cultivated in secret. As Lisa stared at the room she had once considered safe, she noticed details she had missed. Drawings depicting violence and death, detailed logs of traps and minor attacks, and notes that analyzed human behavior with a disturbingly clinical eye. A cold realization settled over her. The curiosity that had seemed like a harmless phase had evolved into something much more dangerous. Her son was no longer simply curious about violence. He was planning it. Each carefully hidden notebook, each quiet experiment, hinted at the methodical and sinister mind behind them. Lisa understood, in a way she could not yet fully articulate, that this was only the beginning, that the darkness she now glimpsed had been growing for years, unnoticed and unchecked, ready to erupt in ways she could never have imagined. Ethan's behavior escalated quietly but unmistakably, a series of small acts that slowly revealed the depth of his obsession with violence. At first, the incident seemed minor, almost accidental. A stray animal found hurt in the neighborhood, a broken window at a local store, or a neighbor's garden deliberately trampled. Each event alone could be dismissed as random mischief, but patterns began to emerge that suggested careful planning. Lisa, increasingly uneasy, started to notice the connections, though the full scope of her son's actions remained hidden beneath layers of innocence and adolescence. He spent hours alone, wandering the streets after school without explanation, his movements deliberate and calculated. Occasionally, he would return with small items he had taken from local homes or shops, nothing of great value, but each acquisition seemed purposeful. He recorded his findings in secret notebooks, cataloging every detail with precision. Lisa sometimes glimpsed him writing in these journals, noting times, locations, and reactions, but she dismissed them at first, thinking them mere homework or school projects. The realization that these journals were blueprints for cruelty had not yet fully taken hold. Ethan's obsession with violent news reports grew more pronounced. He would watch for hours, memorizing details of crimes, methods of attack, and police response times. His fascination was not casual. It was meticulous, almost scientific. Each broadcast became a lesson, each report a study in strategy. Lisa noticed the way his eyes sharpened at particularly gruesome details, the quiet satisfaction that flickered across his face as he analyzed the behavior of criminals and victims alike. She tried to reassure herself, attributing it to curiosity or teenage fascination, but the sense of dread in her chest continued to grow. The community began to feel the effects of his actions, though no one suspected him. Pets went missing, minor fires were reported in empty lots, and small acts of vandalism occurred with increasing frequency. School authorities noted damage to property and unexplainable disruptions, yet the culprits were never identified. Lisa observed these patterns with growing fear, her maternal instinct warning her that something was far more serious than anyone realized. Each small act was no longer harmless. It was a rehearsal, a test, a preparation for something far darker. One night, Lisa noticed Ethan lingering outside longer than usual. She followed him discreetly and witnessed him observing the neighborhood children, noting their routines and movements. The methodical nature of his actions was terrifying. He studied patterns, timed departures, and recorded every observation in his notebook. The truth became impossible to ignore. Her son was not merely curious about violence. He was planning, analyzing, and preparing. Lisa's fear deepened as she realized that intervention had become urgent. She began documenting his movements and actions, hoping to gather enough evidence to prevent disaster. The boy she thought she knew, the polite, quiet child, was a facade. Beneath it lay a calculating, remorseless mind capable of orchestrating harm on a large scale. With each passing day, the signs became clearer, the pattern more disturbing, and the chilling reality undeniable. Her 14-year-old son was becoming something monstrous, a mass killer in the making. The line between childhood and criminality had blurred beyond recognition. Lisa faced a terrifying dilemma: how to stop her own son before his growing obsession turned into irreversible tragedy. Every small act of cruelty, every unnoticed pattern, had been building toward an inevitable breaking point. And with each passing day, that breaking point drew nearer, leaving Lisa in a state of constant dread, wondering how much longer she could contain the darkness she had unwittingly nurtured. Lisa's world began to unravel the night she discovered Ethan's hidden journal. She had entered his bedroom under the pretense of checking on homework, but was drawn to a loose floorboard that she had long suspected concealed something. Beneath it lay a thick notebook bound in black leather, filled with meticulous entries that chronicled acts of cruelty, plans, and observations. As she flipped through the pages, a growing sense of horror settled over her. Each page revealed a mind that was calculating, patient, and terrifyingly methodical. The journal contained detailed accounts of past incidents, some of which Lisa had only vaguely suspected, now clearly traced back to her son. He had documented stolen items, small traps, and targeted pets, analyzing the effectiveness of each attempt. But the journal went far beyond minor acts of mischief. There were explicit plans for large-scale attacks, complete with maps, timelines, and sketches of potential victims. Every detail suggested that Ethan had been thinking about these actions for months, possibly years, and had meticulously prepared for them in secret. As Lisa read, she realized that her son had an uncanny understanding of human behavior. He wrote about timing, about predicting responses, about exploiting routines. Every observation he had made over the years, the movements of neighbors, the habits of classmates, even the reactions of teachers, had been cataloged and analyzed. His journal revealed a disturbing blend of intelligence and obsession, a young mind focused entirely on domination and control. Fear began to overwhelm her. She imagined the potential consequences if Ethan's plans were carried out. Her son, whom she had loved and protected all his life, was capable of orchestrating mass harm with terrifying precision. The realization left her feeling powerless. The child she had raised was no longer just a child. He had become something dangerous, someone whose actions could not be predicted or restrained through reason or discipline alone. Lisa began to piece together the incidents she had previously dismissed. The missing pets, the fires, the unexplained damage to property, and saw them in a new, horrifying light. These were not random acts or teenage rebellion. They were rehearsals, practice runs designed to perfect his methods. Every step he had taken was a progression toward a larger goal, a carefully constructed escalation of violence. The thought that she had unknowingly raised a future mass killer consumed her. Guilt, terror, and disbelief mingled in a way that made every moment feel like walking on a knife's edge. Every interaction with Ethan now carried weight, every decision a potential trigger for disaster. Lisa understood that she could not approach the situation casually. Intervention was urgent, but how could she confront a mind that had already anticipated almost every possible move? By the end of the night, Lisa had made a decision. She could no longer ignore the evidence, could no longer pretend that her son's fascination with violence was harmless. She began to document everything she had discovered, preparing to involve authorities, knowing that doing so could change the course of their lives forever. The journal had revealed not just her son's dark fantasies, but the terrifying clarity of his intent. She realized the horrifying truth. Ethan was not a child who simply dreamed of violence. He was a young, calculating mass killer in the making, and the countdown to the potential tragedy had already begun. The moment Lisa contacted the authorities, the gravity of the situation became painfully real. At first, officers were hesitant to accept that a 14-year-old could be capable of orchestrating mass violence with such precision. Teenage misbehavior, curiosity, and exaggeration often blurred the lines in the eyes of law enforcement. But when she presented Ethan's meticulously detailed journal, along with her own documentation of suspicious behavior and past incidents, the skepticism evaporated. Investigators realized that they were dealing with a highly intelligent, methodical, and dangerous individual, despite his young age. A special investigative team was assigned to the case, combining juvenile specialists, forensic experts, and local law enforcement. They examined the apartment room by room, uncovering a chilling collection of evidence. Hidden under floorboards were knives, traps, and small homemade devices designed to cause harm. Every item was catalogued and photographed. The team reconstructed his movements and reviewed video surveillance of the neighborhood, tracing patterns that confirmed his obsession with controlling and harming others. It became clear that Ethan's actions were not impulsive. They were deliberate, practiced, and escalating. Lisa watched the investigation unfold with a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that authorities were taking action, and horror at the extent of her son's preparations. Every discovery in the apartment revealed a level of premeditation that no parent should ever witness in a child. Maps with potential targets, lists of routines for neighbors and classmates, and psychological profiles of potential victims demonstrated an understanding of fear and human behavior that was far beyond his age. The realization was almost unbearable. Her son had been planning this for months, if not years, without detection. Psychologists were brought in to evaluate Ethan, and their reports were unsettling. They described a child exhibiting signs of extreme detachment, lack of empathy, and obsessive-compulsive tendencies, all focused on the analysis and execution of violence. He was polite and calm during interviews, answering questions with chilling precision, yet he lacked any sense of remorse. His intelligence made him all the more dangerous, and authorities recognized that conventional interventions would be insufficient to contain his capabilities. As the investigation progressed, Lisa grappled with her own feelings of guilt and disbelief. Could she have seen the warning signs earlier? Had she dismissed behaviors that should have raised alarm? The journal had revealed a mind she did not recognize, and the realization that she had lived alongside this for years without full awareness was crushing. Her maternal instincts clashed with the undeniable facts. Her son posed a significant threat, and ignoring it could have resulted in unimaginable tragedy. The authorities moved quickly to secure him, and Ethan was placed in a high-security juvenile facility designed for extreme cases. While he was physically removed from the community, the emotional impact on Lisa and the town remained profound. Lisa faced an ongoing struggle with guilt, fear, and grief, knowing that the child she had raised had become capable of monstrous acts. The case of Ethan Morgan became a national story, igniting debates about juvenile crime, parental responsibility, and the psychology of young killers. It challenged assumptions about innocence, demonstrating that even the most ordinary-seeming child could harbor extraordinary darkness. The investigation, the media attention, and the public scrutiny created a ripple effect that would forever change Lisa's life and leave a community questioning what signs they had overlooked in their own children. The aftermath of Ethan Morgan's arrest sent shockwaves through the small town of Brooksville and across the nation. News outlets covered every detail, from the discovery of his hidden journal to the meticulous planning he had carried out in secret. Parents were terrified, schools implemented emergency safety protocols, and psychologists debated how a child so young could harbor such extreme violence. Lisa Morgan became both a cautionary tale and a symbol of vigilance, a mother who had uncovered the unimaginable truth about her own son. Ethan's placement in a secure juvenile facility marked the beginning of a new chapter in understanding his mind. Psychologists and criminal behavior specialists were brought in to evaluate him extensively. They studied his journals, interviewed him under controlled conditions, and monitored his interactions with others. Their findings painted a disturbing picture. A boy capable of calculating harm with astonishing precision, displaying an absence of empathy, and demonstrating obsessive tendencies toward controlling outcomes. Despite his age, he functioned more like a young strategist than a typical adolescent, and his potential for danger was significant. For Lisa, the personal consequences were devastating. The woman who had raised and nurtured Ethan now faced public scrutiny, a mixture of sympathy and judgment, and a lingering sense of guilt. She questioned herself constantly, wondering if she had overlooked signs, dismissed early warnings, or failed to prevent the escalation. Her grief was compounded by fear of what her son had done, fear of what might have happened, and fear of what the future might hold if he ever left confinement. Communities nationwide examined the case as a warning about the hidden capacity for violence in children, the fine line between curiosity and obsession, and the signs parents might overlook. Ethan's story sparked debates in schools, law enforcement agencies, and psychological research communities, all seeking to understand how such a young mind could develop homicidal intent while remaining unnoticed. Training programs were implemented, aiming to help parents, teachers, and social workers recognize early warning signs in behavior, speech, and patterns of thought. Meanwhile, Lisa worked to process her own trauma and find some sense of closure. She engaged with support groups, consulted mental health professionals, and spoke cautiously to reporters in ways that emphasized awareness rather than sensationalism. She wanted her story to serve a purpose, to help prevent similar tragedies and educate families on the importance of vigilance. While nothing could undo the horror of discovering her son's dark plans, she hoped to transform the fear into action and understanding for others. Ethan's case remained under close supervision, a long-term study in juvenile criminal behavior. Experts documented his development, monitored his interactions, and continually updated strategies to manage his risks. While he remained physically confined, the psychological implications of his actions rippled outward, affecting the community, professionals studying him, and families across the country. Ultimately, the story of Ethan Morgan became a chilling lesson on the capacity for darkness within a child's mind, the necessity of early intervention, and the burden carried by those who discover horrifying truths too late. For Lisa, it was a lifetime of reckoning, a constant tension between love and fear, and a relentless reminder that evil can sometimes hide behind the most ordinary faces. The case would continue to serve as both a warning and a study for years to come, leaving a permanent mark on the town, the nation, and the understanding of juvenile criminal behavior.